Hi guys. Well, it's been an exceptionally busy year for Milestone this year, hasn't it? We've had the releases of Monster Energy Supercross Gravel and MotoGP 18. So really, I didn't think we'd see another MXGP game this
No.
year, but we were wrong. So this year marks the release of MXGP Pro. We've been playing through the game, so we're going to give our impressions. Joining me for this team chat is Kevin.
Hi guys.
And James.
Howdy, folks.
So, as you can probably glean from the title, MXGP Pro really takes the series in a more hardcore simulation focused direction compared to MXGP 3. Obviously, the series has had some elements of simulation, but they're really going full on in this game. Kevin, you've probably played the game the most out of us. I've been focusing more on the crew too.
Yep.
How different would you say the physics are compared to MXGP 3 if we're going from one game to the other?
Yeah, I think
it's steeper learning curve.
It is. I mean, like you say, Pro in the title says it all, really, doesn't it? It's very much simulation-based title. So going from 3 to Pro, I mean, it's a different world basically. The level of depth to physics and the ground deformation is worlds apart. You know, there's so much more depth there. The bike moves around an awful lot more. You've really got to keep that rear wheel in check at all times. So it's a tough game. It's a game that you're going to get on and you're going to crash a lot. You know,
I did plenty of that in Isle of Man T2.
Yeah, well, this feels maybe not quite as intense as TT, but it certainly is as difficult early on, at least. You know, if you lean too hard into a turn, you're going to come off. If you make contact with anything on the track side, you're going to come off. If you make contact with an AI rider, there's a good chance that you could come off the bike. So you can over jump jumps and sometimes you land and you're fine. Other times you'll land and you'll fall off your bike. So there's a lot of changes in this one compared to 3. You know, it's all much more unforgiving compared to 3, at least on the Pro physics setting. Having said that, of course, there is semi-pro and standard. Now, standard is, I wouldn't say it's like easy mode as such, but it's certainly much more accessible than Pro. So newcomers to the series will still get a lot out of this title, even though there is still a good level of depth to the handling, and there is a chance you still will come off your bike in standard, but it's a little bit toned down compared to Pro. So if you're worried about the Pro title, if you're new to the series, you know, I would say don't worry about that. You know, check the settings, get onto the standard setting first, and go from there, because it is altogether much more accessible compared to the Pro. So that in itself is a really good achievement from Milestone. We've seen it with Codemasters before. Dirt 4, you had the game and the simulation handling. You know, the simulation guys weren't happy with the simulation handling because we expected sort of Dirt Rally 2 of sorts. And we was quite let down in that respect. But I feel with Milestone, they've done a very good job of creating a game that veterans and newcomers alike will get something out of. So it's always a testing task to get that balance right. And I think they've done a decent job. Although Pro is very unforgiving, I would say it's not to the point where you're pulling your hair out. Having said that, you will need
TT frustrating in other words.
No, you'll need to invest maybe an hour or so into the physics, just to get your head around it. Even if you are, you know, if you've put a lot of time with the other the prequels in the MXGP series, there still is that learning curve. So it's a good idea to get onto the compound actually, and just have a little play around on the various tracks. There's a little figure 8 track actually, which really showcases the new physics in action. You see the bike sliding down these sort of banked sections and such, so you can really get to sort of grips with the detail and what changes they've made. Actually, one thing that really impressed me, probably just as much as the physics, was the ground deformation. This is something that Milestone were not really shouting about, were they?
No, that's it. It was one of the defining features of MXGP 3, and my play, they've really taken it to the next level in MXGP Pro. It just looks like a little bit more realistic, and it does have a really profound effect on the bike physics. So you've really got to you know, study the deformation of the track and really, you know, go around the right grooves, and it's a lot more convincing than it's ever been before. And you know, if we go back to MXGP 2, it was all but gone. So it's great to see it back in MXGP Pro and actually, you know, taken to the next level. Yeah, it's a really unique feature. Like you said, they need to shout about it more because it is a very unique feature to them.
Yeah, I mean,
it actually sprays up into the camera a lot more now as well.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was requested by fans, a little bit more sort of mud spray, but they seem to have actually dialed back the dust particle effects, I would say. But because we have these sort of chunks of mud, I think that sort of more makes up for it. The ground deformation is very impressive. It's certainly the most impressive ground deformation in the series, no doubt. I mean, it does. It depends in a visual sense. It depends what sort of what country track you're at. I mean, it's different surfaces, different weather conditions, etc. I find it looks best in the wet, where you can really see every little detail or the nuance to the not only the visual aspect but the physical aspect of the deformation. You see little puddles and stuff in the little gaps, and it's really, really impressive at times. Whereas at other tracks in the dry, it looks less pronounced, I would say. So it's a bit of a mixed bag as to how it looks, at least. But there certainly is a lot more. It affects the bike a lot more than it did before. So they certainly are going in the right direction with it. But I feel that because of the physics, because of the ground deformation, something had to give, and unfortunately it's the trackside detail with the crowds and flares and flags and all that stuff that was so prominent and so impressive in MXGP 3. It's just largely gone away. So I was taking a few pictures comparing the sort of current track versus last year's from MXGP 3, and in places it's very obviously toned down. It's almost embarrassing in places, but I can understand the compromise that they had to make.
Yeah, it's lost a bit of that sort of rousing atmosphere that MXGP 3 had. Watching that's a big part of the sport, really, isn't it? The spectators and the horns, the flares, all that kind of thing really adds to the atmosphere. I felt like they did it quite well in MotoGP 18, funnily enough.
Yeah.
Strangely, but I guess obviously, like we said in MXGP Pro, it has a lot more. There's a lot more going on, isn't there, with the advanced deformation? So you can understand a few compromises like that from that point of view. So obviously, we're talking about how intuitive and accessible the game is. It starts with a training mode, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was useful for newcomers?
It gives you various tests. There's 6 core subjects, I believe. I think there's 5 lessons within each, so it's 30 in total. And I just feel that they're too difficult because you have to complete any one in the set to go on to the next. So what will happen is you'll get newcomers come on here. They'll do 1 or 2 attempts, which they'll probably fail because it offers it expects almost close to perfection to pass these tests. So you'll get on there, you probably won't pass these straight away, and you'll just be put off with it. So I made a point of this in the review. It should have some sort of scoring system where veteran players can strive for the best scores, but equally, beginners can still access all that content immediately rather than have to unlock it all. So to answer your question, for newcomers, I feel they've almost been let down with the system they currently have in the trainer mode.
So out of interest, is there only just one grading? It's only just you either pass the test or fail the test. There's no like bronze, silver, or gold.
Yeah, it's all or nothing, unfortunately, and that's where I feel that they've missed a trick there.
Yeah, there's a bit of a missed opportunity there. At least if you got like a 3-tier system, you'd have the incentive to perhaps improve or gradually up your game a bit. So to get to the top training score region. But if it's just a pass or fail thing, as you say, if you fail it like 4 times in a row, it's not really much incentive to carry on. You're just going to get immensely frustrated by it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I say, a scoring system would be perfect, wouldn't it? Because you could, even if you had low score, you'd get like the information, you would extract that information which you need to, to learn about the sport and the various techniques involved. So yeah, the fact that they have an all or nothing approach, for me, it's quite silly, really.
Yeah, they never quite got their tutorials right, have they, Milestone? Monster Energy, Supercross, they were literally just text tutorials, which wasn't really enough to really help you learn the various techniques.
It doesn't engage you, does it? It's always better to show rather than tell, or let the player do it. It's much more engaging, and yeah, they need to. I know they've gone for the pro thing. They want to appeal to the simulation, but I feel that because they have a standard setting, which should be accessible to most, that should have reflected in the tutorial setup as well.
That's where the confusion lies in the way, because is it a true sequel to MXGP3, or is it more of a kind of hardcore spin-off? It's not quite clear.
Yeah, I would say that hardcore or simulation inclined players will get a lot out of this title. They won't mind that there's been a reduction in trackside detail, because all they really care about is the physics and deformation, those two areas. And honestly, MXGP Pro does those two areas fantastically well. So you're going to get a lot out of this game if you're purely after a simulation focused title. Having said that, it seems like this series is getting more and more sparse in terms of content. They're taking more and more modes out. We see, for example, real events seems to be history nowadays.
It's not that.
It was enjoyable, wasn't it? You had like scenarios from real life that you replay, and I got a lot out of those in I think it was MXGP2, wasn't it?
Fan service. I mean,
yeah,
I've been saying this in pretty much every milestone title I've reviewed for the past 2 years. There's not enough fan service. Where are the real events? They used to be a standard feature. Now they're paid DLC. Oh, now they're gone. Why is this?
Exactly. Yeah, they've slowly sort of taken that away from the player. And Motocross of Nations, which featured in MXGP3, is gone as well. So it's the lightest package as far as I can remember. So it's, like I say, simulation players will get a lot out of it, but those that are looking for an overall experience may be left disappointed. Graphically, it's gone a bit backwards, and in terms of overall package, it's certainly got slimmer and slimmer. So
there's also the career mode is again a bit of a copy and paste job.
Copy and paste,
as we've seen in.
I mean, we do have podium sequences. Yeah, we do have podium sequences, but they last all of about 8 or 9 seconds. So they're very brief. They're very basic. It's almost like they were there just to tick a box rather than provide any sort of
feature, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
We have cutscenes now.
Yeah. Having said that, I mean, the stuff in the garage is quite impressive. The little bits of animations and graphics, but I thought they've got a long way to go to represent the sport in terms of what happens off the track. So. Like you say, it needs to be a lot more fan service, more cutscenes like we had in the real events. We had cutscenes of action that was going on.
You could have like live video clips in the actual sport.
Yeah,
it really does add to the fan engagement, I think.
It does. I mean, if you look all the way back to, say, the WRC series from Evolution Studios, you had these amazing sort of pre-rally sequences, these video sequences that gave you an essence of where you was racing. It almost felt like you was on a journey around the world, taking part in the real sport. That's what we love in our racing games, but sadly that seems to be taken away from most of our games these days.
Have kind of dabbled in that, where I remember some of the menus in the old WRC titles actually had clips of the real sport, so they have tried that, but they don't seem to have followed it through, unfortunately. I mean, I kind of think, did we really need another MXGP game this year? I probably would have rather waited an extra year so they could really fine-tune it and sort of redefine the series and flesh out some of these elements that have been lacking.
Yeah, it's almost like they've hit a ceiling now, regards to what they can squeeze in. I mean, with the the reduction of trackside detail in favour of physics and such, I just feel that maybe they've hit the ceiling on what they can do with the current gen console. So in order for this series to really progress, I feel we probably have to wait until next gen.
Yeah, so I think the current generation hardware is starting to show its limitations.
Yep.
So it's still impressive what they've achieved with the ground deformation, for example. I mean, you've played it on a standard PlayStation 4, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right, and it's very impressive. Certainly is way more advanced than what we've seen before. So you can imagine the future MXGP title with very deep ruts and ground deformation, and it's got potential to be absolutely fantastic.
Has the helmet cam changed at all? Because I know you like riding from the first-person cockpit.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's changed for the worst, in my opinion. It's like when the rider goes around a turn, he's almost looking too far into the turn, or there's a bit of awkward animation from the sort of the head position that I don't know, I wasn't a fan of, which is kind of in keeping with MotoGP 18 as well, because they changed the animation on the first person as well, which I didn't particularly like. So I preferred MXGP 3 to Pro, and I preferred MotoGP 17 to 18 in terms of first person viewpoints.
but you still got those really nice, authentic GoPro cameras in the replays, which everyone wants to see in game. But
yeah, the sort of 2 helmet cams are there. Yeah,
I
and
don't
it
think
does look very impressive.
I don't think it would work though when you're actually playing the game. As
it might be a
practical
bit,
viewpoint, it'd be a bit tricky, I think. But
a bit nausea-inducing, I think. But
a lot of fans want
yeah.
it. How does the scrubbing feel?
Scrubbing is it's as awkward as it's always been. Really, it's I don't know. They need to simplify the system, make it quicker, or maybe just assign it to a button press. I feel, because I never feel confident doing the scrubbing, because if you're not particularly, if you're not bang on with your inputs, there's always a chance that you won't do a scrub, and it can mess up your jump. So it's, I don't know. I always feel there's that little bit of doubt in actually performing a scrub. Like I might only get it 80% of the time when it should be 100% of the time. There shouldn't be any doubt to it. So it does take a little bit of getting used to actually performing it, and it just feels clumsy. It just feels it takes too long to transition. So I feel they've still got a long way to go with that.
Right enough. I mean, would you say it's a better system than in prior MXGP games, or is it about on par with prior entries?
It hasn't evolved massively, I would say, from early titles. That there are changes, but I feel that it still feels as clumsy, as it always was, or it maybe improved very small amounts, and it just feels like they could totally change the approach to it. Maybe just give us some, I don't know, maybe the speed of the bike whipping out could be tied to the speed at which you fling the left analog stick or something like that. It just feels like it takes too long and it's too inconsistent for me.
Yeah, I find you have to be really precise with your inputs. There's so many jumps where I've just not landed it quite right and then end up falling off. It's that minor mistake with the controls. You have to be a lot more precise now than you ever have before. It's certainly a noticeable step up in difficulty and the learning curve from what I've played.
Yeah.
I think the audio's, is it fair to say it's a bit of a step back from MXGP 3 or roughly on par?
It's more or less the same, I would say. No great improvements, certainly. There's certainly got a long way to go, and this was another area, along with the sort of graphics downgrade, that sort of disappointed me. I expected a bit more in light of their recent sort of improvements in the MotoGP series, for instance, on the old engine, ironically.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know. They're not capturing the essence of these bikes at all. I know it's very hard to do. Often even the longest running companies in racing games struggle with audio. It's just one of those areas that seems to be incredibly difficult to replicate. I can understand that, but at the same time, when it sounds more or less the same as before, it is a bit frustrating, and particularly when they've got the physics so well right and they've got the ground deformation, that sound really lets it down all the more, I find.
It's a shame. I think another area actually that's a bit of a step back is the AI opponents. They were great in MXGP 3. They really deviated from their racing lines. They were very unpredictable. Whereas
not so much.
From what I played in MXGP Pro, they're very rigid when it comes to the racing line. They really stray from it at all. You feel like you're racing against very robotic opponents again. And it's the same in MotoGP 18.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case, which makes it all the more disappointing when they've got the physics in place. You want to see bikers sliding out and crashing. I mean, there's a few crashes here and there, but certainly not as much as I would like to see. Just to add a bit more, more chaos to the races. So yeah, in that respect, the AI, much like the sounds, really does need quite a bit of improvement.
It's the opposite to Monster Energy Supercross in that regard. There's crashes all the time.
Yeah. I mean, they're very different games, aren't they? I really enjoy Supercross. Yeah, very technical, isn't it, Supercross? Whereas MXGP, you're sort of a little bit more gung-ho, I guess. But very different titles. If you're a fan of motocross, I would actually recommend picking both up, because they do offer very sort of different experiences.
No, they're very different styles of racing in real life and obviously in the games.
Yeah.
But yeah, Monster Energy just felt like a bit of a breath of fresh air, really, because we played so many MXGP titles lately. But it's good to see Milestone really diversify.
In
the bike racing genre.
It'll be interesting to see if they actually make Supercross an annual sequel as well.
Yeah, I'm curious, because that has the potential to sell quite well, because obviously it has a broader appeal in some ways in the US market. Be interested to see how well Monster Energy actually sold. By the sounds of it, I mean, MXGP Pro It does move the series forward in terms of the physics, which for some people will be the most important aspect. Visually, it's also improved, actually quite remarkably, I'd say, considering it's an annual series. They've not had much time to work on it. And of course, the ground deformation. It is lacking in some areas, as we've covered, but I'd say it's done. It does what it set out to do, and appealing to hardcore players. Do you think that's a kind of fair summation, Kevin?
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of what its vision was, it certainly has achieved what they set out to do. But at the same time, it's disappointing that there's big compromises in other areas. We haven't seen a massive progression of the career mode. We haven't seen the same levels of crowds and atmosphere that we have in MXGP 3. We haven't seen improvements, particularly in sound. The AI has taken a step backwards. So although, yes, they've made 2 steps forward, they've almost made 2 steps back at the same time. So, but there's massive potential there for a future sequel to really knock it out of the park. So I would say the series, it's exciting times for the series right now. They're getting things in place now which can bode well for perhaps next generation. But I think for now, they're just going to have to make the compromises, maybe come out with MXGP 4 with a different sort of focus, I guess, and then we'll see where the future is for the series. But so far, I think it's evolving nicely. It's going in the right direction, and very much looking forward to the next game.
Well, we'll have to wait and see then how the series progresses. No doubt there'll be probably another release next year at the rate that Milestone are churning out titles at the moment. Of course, this won't even be the last bite game of the year from them, as we've still got Ride 3 later this year. Definitely one of our most anticipated titles, I'd say. Massive potential there. But anyway, that's about it now for our team chat on MXGP Pro. Thanks, guys, for joining me. You can read our full review on the website and obviously check out other videos on the channel. That's it for now. Bye for now.